Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the clock on his computer screen. It was almost midnight and he was still stuck in the research lab doing his weekly equipment checks. Being the night shift guy at the space station wasn't glamorous, but someone had to do it. The Omega research station floated quietly in space, far from Earth. Jake had been working here for 2 years now, studying alien rocks and space dust. It was usually pretty boring work, but it paid well and gave him time to think about his future. Tonight felt different, though. The computers had been acting weird all day, showing strange energy readings from the lower levels of the station. The other scientist had gone to bed hours ago, leaving Jake to figure out what was going wrong. He grabbed his toolkit and headed down to level 7, the deepest part of the station. Most people never went down there because it was just storage and old equipment. The hallways were dimly lit and eerily quiet. Jake's footsteps echoed as he walked, making the place feel even more lonely. The energy readings were getting stronger as he got closer to storage room 7B. That was weird because nothing important was supposed to be in there. Jake checked his scanner again. The numbers were off the charts now. When he opened the door to the storage room, his jaw dropped. Instead of boxes and old equipment, he found himself looking at a room he had never seen before. The walls were made of some kind of smooth, dark material that seemed to shimmer in the light. Strange symbols glowed softly along the edges. What in the world? Jake whispered to himself. He stepped inside carefully, his heart beating fast. This room definitely wasn't on any of the station blueprints he had studied. How could an entire room exist without anyone knowing about it? In the center of the room stood something that looked like a large glass tube, about 8 feet tall. Inside the tube, surrounded by swirling mist, was a figure. Jake moved closer, squinting to see better. It looked like a person, but something was off about the proportions. The figure was tall and lean with an athletic build. Even through the mist, Jake could see that this wasn't quite human. The skin had a bronze tint, and the muscles looked more defined than any human he had ever seen. The face was peaceful, eyes closed like someone in a deep sleep. Jake pulled out his phone to call his supervisor, but there was no signal. That was impossible. The station's communication system worked everywhere. He tried his radio, but all he got was static. As he was fumbling with his equipment, something incredible happened. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. A soft humming sound filled the room, and Jake felt the hair on his arm stand up from some kind of energy. Suddenly, panels in the wall slid open, revealing screens covered with symbols and diagrams that Jake didn't recognize. The technology looked incredibly advanced, far beyond anything humans had ever built. The designs were elegant and alien, clearly made by someone with a completely different way of thinking. Jake approached one of the panels, fascinated despite his growing nervousness. When he touched the surface, it responded to his finger, lighting up with new patterns. Without thinking, he traced one of the symbols with his finger. That's when everything went wrong. The room filled with a loud alarm sound, and red lights began flashing everywhere. The glass tube in the center started to drain of its mist, and Jake could hear mechanical sounds coming from the walls around him. He ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. He pushed and pulled, but it was sealed tight. Panic started to set in. Jake pounded on the door and shouted for help, but he knew no one would hear him. The other night shift workers were on different levels, and the walls seemed to block all sound. Behind him, the glass tube continued to drain. The figure inside became clearer, and Jake could see it was definitely not human. The being was female, with long limbs and features that were both beautiful and intimidating. Her hair was dark and seemed to move on its own, even in the still air. Jake turned back to the control panels, desperately trying to understand how to open the door. The symbols meant nothing to him, but he kept pressing different combinations, hoping something would work. The room's computer system seemed to be running some kind of program, and he was trapped until it finished. The glass tube made a loud hiss, and the front panel slid away. Mist poured out onto the floor, and Jake watched in amazement and terror as the being inside took her first breath in. Who knows how long? Her eyes opened slowly, revealing pupils that were larger than human eyes, adapted for seeing in low light. She stepped out of the tube gracefully, her movements fluid and controlled. When she saw Jake, she stopped and stared at him with intense curiosity. She was even taller than he had thought, at least 6.5 feet, with a presence that filled the room. Jake pressed himself against the door, his heart racing. The being tilted her head, studying him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. She said something in a language he had never heard before, with sounds that seemed almost musical. When Jake didn't respond, she tried again, this time with different words. Her voice was strong and clear, with an accent that reminded him of nothing on earth. She seemed frustrated that he couldn't understand her. She began to move around the room, touching the control panels with familiarity. This was clearly her technology, her space. Jake realized he wasn't just trapped with an alien being, he was trapped in her territory. The being looked back at Jake and gestured toward the door, then shook her head. She pointed at him, then at herself, then made a gesture that looked like she was grappling with an invisible opponent. Her meaning was becoming clear, even without words. She wanted something from him before she would let him leave. Jake's mind raced. He was alone with a being from another world, trapped in a room with technology he didn't understand. Whatever she wanted, he was going to have to figure it out if he ever wanted to see home again. The adventure of his lifetime was about to begin, whether he wanted it or not. The next few hours were the strangest of Jake's entire life. The alien woman seemed determined to communicate with him, but neither of them could understand what the other was saying. She would point at things around the room and say words in her musical language, then look at Jake expectantly. Jake tried his best to help. He would point at the same objects and say the English words, speaking slowly and clearly. The woman was obviously intelligent because she started repeating his words back to him, though her accent made them sound completely different. Wall, Jake said, touching the smooth surface. Wah-ul, she repeated, her voice making the simple word sound exotic. Door, he said, pointing at the sealed entrance. Do-or, she tried, nodding when Jake smiled encouragingly. But the real breakthrough came when the room's computer systems started responding to their conversation. The screens around them began, showing pictures and symbols that matched the words they were saying. It was like the most advanced translation program ever created, slowly learning from their interaction. Jake realized this technology was far beyond anything humans had ever dreamed of. The computer was actually listening to them speak and figuring out how their languages worked. Within a few hours, it was showing simple pictures when either of them spoke, helping them understand each other better. The woman's name was something that sounded like Zara to Jake's ears, though he suspected he wasn't pronouncing it quite right. She seemed amused by his attempts, but appreciated his effort. When she said his name back, it sounded like music. Through the translation system, Jake learned that Zara's people were called something that the computer translated as warriors of the stars. They had traveled across the galaxy for thousands of years, visiting different worlds and meeting new species. But something had gone wrong. Zara kept pointing at the screens showing star maps, then making sad expressions. Her people had been scattered across space, separated by some kind of disaster. She had been sleeping in the glass tube, waiting for someone to wake her up and help her reconnect with her kind. The room they were trapped in wasn't just a storage space. It was a testing chamber, designed by her people to evaluate other species they encountered. The computer systems were running ancient programs, determining whether Jake was worthy of learning about her civilization. Jake felt overwhelmed by all this information. Just a few hours ago, he had been doing boring equipment checks. Now he was apparently being tested by an alien computer to see if humans deserved to know about an advanced spacefaring civilization. But the most concerning part was what Zara kept trying to explain about the testing process. She would make gestures that looked like fighting or wrestling, then point between herself and Jake. She would demonstrate moves, showing how she could grab and throw an invisible opponent. The computer screen started showing videos of her people engaged in what looked like combat sports, but it wasn't violent or angry. The participants seemed respectful of each other, bowing before and after their matches. It reminded Jake of martial arts competitions he had seen on Earth. Slowly, Jake began to understand what was expected of him. In Zara's culture, the best way to truly know someone was through physical competition. Not to hurt them, but to see their character under pressure. How did they react when challenged? Did they give up easily or keep trying? Were they honorable, even when losing? Jake had never been much of an athlete. He had played some sports in high school, but nothing serious. The idea of wrestling with someone who was clearly much stronger and faster than him was terrifying. But as the hours passed and the translation system improved, Jake realized he didn't have much choice. The docker remained sealed, and all of Zara's gestures indicated that completing these challenges was the only way to earn passage out of the chamber. What made it even more complicated was that Zara seemed genuinely friendly. She shared some kind of energy bar from her equipment that tasted surprisingly good. She showed Jake how to use the room's water recycling system. She even demonstrated some stretching exercises that helped him feel less stiff from sitting in the same position for hours. It became clear that this wasn't about punishment or domination. Zara's people had created these testing chambers as a way to build bridges between different species. They believed that facing challenges together was the fastest way to develop trust and understanding. The computer systems continued monitoring their every interaction, measuring things Jake couldn't understand. Progress bars appeared on the screens, slowly filling as he and Zara learned to communicate better. By the time Jake felt ready to attempt the first challenge, he had gained a deep respect for Zara and her people. Their technology was incredible, but they used it to bring species together rather than conquer them. Still, as Zara demonstrated the first wrestling technique she wanted to teach him, Jake couldn't help but wonder if he was completely out of his depth. Jake had always thought he was in decent shape, but watching Zara move around the chamber made him feel like a complete beginner. She was incredibly graceful, moving with a fluid strength that made every gesture look effortless. When she demonstrated basic combat stances, it was like watching a dancer who could also probably lift a car. The translation system had improved enough that they could have simple conversations now. Zara explained that her people's competitions weren't about winning or losing. They were about showing courage, learning from each other, and building respect through shared challenges. "Your people fight to hurt?" she asked, her pronunciation getting better every hour. "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "But we also have sports where we compete for fun, to test ourselves and get better." This seemed to make Zara happy. She nodded enthusiastically and showed him images on the screen of her people's competitions. They looked intense but friendly, with participants helping each other up after matches and sharing meals together afterward. Jake's first attempt at one of her basic moves was embarrassing. Zara had shown him how to properly position his feet and hands for what seemed like a simple grappling technique. But when he tried to copy her movements, he nearly fell over. Zara didn't laugh at him, though. Instead, she patiently adjusted his posture, showing him where to put his weight and how to maintain his balance. Her hands were warm and strong, and Jake was surprised by how gentle she was despite her obvious power. "Again," she said in her accented English, stepping back to give him room. Jake tried the movement again, and this time he managed to complete it without falling. It wasn't graceful, but it was progress. Zara clapped her hands together in approval, and Jake felt a surge of unexpected pride. Over the next few hours, Zara taught him several basic techniques. Nothing complicated, just simple ways to maintain balance, how to use leverage instead of pure strength, and basic defensive positions. Jake was amazed by how much thought went into every movement. "Why is this so important to your people?" Jake asked during a break, sitting on the floor and catching his breath. Zara considered the question carefully, the translation system helping her find the right words. "When bodies work hard together, hearts understand faster. Your mind can lie, but your body tells truth." Jake thought about that as he watched her demonstrate another technique. There was something profound about what she was saying. In his regular life, people could hide behind words, pretend to be things they weren't. But physical challenges had a way of revealing who someone really was. The first actual match was terrifying for Jake. Zara had explained the rules through the translation system. No moves intended to cause permanent harm, matches ended when someone submitted or couldn't continue, and both participants had to give their honest best effort. Jake stood across from Zara in the center of the room, his heart pounding. She was at least 6 inches taller than him and clearly much stronger. But her expression was encouraging rather than intimidating. "Remember," she said, "not about winning, about trying." When the match began, Jake was surprised by how patient Zara was. She could have overpowered him immediately, but instead she gave him opportunities to try the techniques she had taught him. When he managed to use leverage to briefly off-balance her, she smiled with genuine pride. Of course, the match didn't last long. Zara eventually pinned Jake to the ground with a move so smooth he barely understood what had happened. But instead of feeling defeated, Jake found himself laughing. The whole experience had been intense but somehow fun. "Good," Zara said, helping him to his feet. "You did not quit." That seemed to be the most important thing to her. Jake had tried his best even though he knew he couldn't win. In her culture, that apparently meant more than actual victory. As they prepared for a second match, Jake noticed something interesting happening on the room's computer screens. The progress bars he had seen earlier were filling up faster now. Whatever the ancient systems were measuring, his willingness to participate was apparently giving them the data they needed. But Jake also realized something else. He was starting to enjoy this. The physical challenge, the problem-solving aspect, of trying to outmaneuver someone stronger than him, the way Zara's respect for him seemed to grow each time he refused to give up. It was all strangely addictive. By the time they finished their third match, Jake was exhausted but exhilarated. On their third day in the chamber, something amazing happened. Jake woke up to find new sections of the room had opened during the night. Walls that had seemed solid before now revealed hidden passages leading to other areas filled with incredible technology. "The testing chamber approves of our progress," Zara explained as they explored together. Her English was getting much better, though she still had that musical accent that made everything sound more interesting. The new areas contained what looked like a library, but instead of books, information was stored in glowing crystals that projected images and sounds when touched. Zara showed Jake how to activate them, and suddenly he was watching the history of her people unfold before his eyes. The warriors of the stars had once been a mighty civilization that traveled between galaxies, not to conquer but to learn and teach. They built these testing chambers on thousands of worlds, creating a network of meeting places where different species could come together safely. "What happened to them?" Jake asked, watching images of beautiful cities and advanced spaceships. Zara's expression grew sad. "The great silence," she said. "Something cut the connections between our worlds. We lost contact with each other. Many of us went into deep sleep, hoping someone would eventually wake us up." Jake felt a chill as he realized the implications. Zara had been alone for thousands of years, waiting in that glass tube for someone like him to stumble into her chamber. The responsibility of that hit him hard, but the crystal libraries contained more than just history. They had detailed information about combat techniques, strategy, and what Zara called the art of understanding through challenge. Jake spent hours learning about her people's philosophy. Physical competition wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about reading your opponent, understanding their thought patterns, and adapting your approach in real time. Every wrestling match was like a conversation between minds and bodies. "Your people have similar ideas," Zara said, showing him crystals that contained information about human martial arts and sports. "But you make it too complicated, too many rules, too much focus on winning." She was right. Jake thought about all the sports he had watched where the emphasis was on defeating the other team or person. Zara's people saw competition as a way to help each other grow stronger and wiser. Their wrestling matches became more sophisticated as Jake learned these new concepts. Instead of just trying to overpower each other, they began incorporating mental challenges. Zara would change her fighting style mid-match, forcing Jake to adapt quickly. She taught him to read body language and anticipate moves before they happened. Jake, discovered he had a talent for strategy that surprised both of them. His scientific training helped him analyze patterns and develop counter techniques. When Zara used the same approach 3 times in a row, Jake would be ready with a response the 4th time. "You think like a hunter," Zara said after one particularly challenging match. Always watching, always learning. The chamber's computer systems were clearly impressed too. New areas kept opening, revealing training equipment that adjusted to Jake's improving abilities. There were balance beams that moved unpredictably, strength-building devices that responded to his effort level, and puzzle rooms that required both physical and mental skills to complete. But the most important development was the growing friendship between Jake and Zara. They spent hours talking about their different worlds, sharing stories about their families and dreams. Zara told him about her home planet, with its 3 moons and floating cities. Jake described Earth's oceans and mountains, things that amazed someone who had grown up among the stars. "Your species is young, but full of potential," Zara said one evening as they rested between training sessions. "That's why the chamber accepts you. You have the courage to try new things." Jake felt proud, but also worried. "What happens when we leave here? How do I help you find your people?" Zara smiled, and Jake realized it was the first time he had seen her look truly happy. "The chamber has been teaching both of us, not just you. I've learned about your technology, your communication systems. Together we can search the galaxy." The idea was both exciting and terrifying. Jake had never imagined leaving the research station, let alone traveling across space on an alien ship. But spending time with Zara had changed him. He felt stronger, more confident, ready to face challenges he would have run from just days earlier. Their final training session was the most intense yet. Zara introduced techniques that required complete trust between partners. They had to work together to solve physical puzzles, with one person supporting the other in positions that would be dangerous if either of them made a mistake. Jake found himself trusting Zara completely, knowing she would never let him fall. And when it was his turn to support her, he discovered he was stronger than he had ever imagined possible. "The chamber will open soon," Zara said as they finished. "Are you ready for what comes next?" Jake looked around at the incredible technology surrounding them, then at his alien friend who had become so important to him. Just a few days ago, he had been a lonely night shift worker. Now he was about to embark on an adventure that would take him to the stars. "I'm ready," he said, and meant it completely. The final test came without warning. Jake and Zara were practicing a complex sequence of moves when suddenly the entire chamber transformed around them. The walls shifted and reconfigured, creating an obstacle course that stretched through multiple connected rooms. "This is it," Zara said, her voice filled with excitement and nervousness. "The ultimate challenge. We must complete it together or we'll never leave this place." The computer's translation system spoke in both their languages. Final compatibility assessment beginning. Participants must demonstrate perfect cooperation, trust, and mutual understanding. Failure will result in chamber reset and extended testing period. Jake's heart raced as he looked at the course ahead of them. It was like nothing he had ever seen, with moving platforms, laser grids that required precise timing to pass through, and puzzles that clearly needed 2 people working in perfect harmony to solve. The first obstacle was a series of platforms that moved in opposite directions. Jake had to time his jumps perfectly, while Zara controlled the platform speeds from a panel on the other side. If either of them made a mistake, Jake would fall into a pit that wasn't dangerous, but would reset the entire course. "Trust me," Zara called out as Jake prepared to jump. Jake closed his eyes and leaped at exactly the moment Zara indicated. He landed safely on the moving platform, his confidence in her judgment absolute. They had trained for this moment, learning to read each other's intentions and react without hesitation. The second challenge required Jake to support Zara as she reached for activation switches placed high on the walls. His job was to provide a stable base while she stretched to reach controls that would open the path forward. One wrong move and they would both fall. Jake planted his feet firmly and locked his arms around Zara's legs as she climbed onto his shoulders. She was heavier than he expected, but all those days of training had made him much stronger. He held steady as she reached for the switches, fighting against the strain in his muscles. "Got it," Zara announced as the next door opened. But the real test of their partnership came in the puzzle rooms. These required them to manipulate complex mechanical devices while separated by walls, communicating only through the sounds they could make and the movements of the machinery itself. Jake found himself in a room filled with gears and levers, while Zara was in an identical room on the other side of a thick barrier. They had to coordinate their actions to make both sets of machinery work together, creating a path through the final obstacle. It was like the most complicated dance Jake had ever attempted, with no music and no way to see his partner. He had to listen carefully to the sounds coming from Zara's room, interpreting the rhythm of her movements and matching his actions to hers. At first, they were completely out of sync. Jake would turn a gear clockwise just as Zara turned hers counterclockwise, causing the entire system to lock up. They had to reset and try again, learning from each mistake. "Listen to the rhythm," Zara called out. "Feel the pattern, don't think about it." Jake took a deep breath and stopped trying to analyze what he was doing. Instead, he focused on the sounds and vibrations coming through the wall. Gradually, he began to sense Zara's movements, anticipating when she would adjust a lever or rotate a gear. It was amazing when they finally got it right. The machinery hummed with perfect synchronization, and Jake could feel Zara's presence through the mechanical connection they had created. They were working as one mind, controlling two sets of hands. The final barrier opened to reveal the chamber's exit, but Jake and Zara weren't finished yet. The computer system had one last surprise for them. "Compatibility assessment complete," it announced. "Subjects have demonstrated exceptional partnership potential. Advanced cultural exchange protocols are now available. Do you wish to proceed?" Jake looked at Zara questioningly. "What does that mean?" "It means the chamber wants to give us something special," she replied, her eyes bright with excitement. "Knowledge and technology that will help us find my people and introduce your species to the galactic community." The walls around them lit up with star maps showing the locations of other testing chambers scattered across the galaxy. Some showed active signals, indicating that other warriors of the stars might still be waiting in stasis. Others displayed information about species that had successfully completed similar tests. Jake realized that what they had accomplished was incredibly rare. Most beings who entered these chambers either failed the tests or only achieved basic compatibility. He and Zara had created something special, a partnership that the ancient systems recognized as exceptional. "If we accept this," Jake said slowly, "there's no going back to my old life, is there?" Zara placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture that had become comfortable and reassuring over their days together. "Your old life was just preparing you for this moment. Everything you learned, every challenge you faced, brought you to this chamber." Jake thought about his quiet job at the research station, his simple apartment, his predictable routine. Then he looked at the star maps showing wonders beyond imagination, adventures waiting to be discovered, and the chance to help reunite an ancient civilization while introducing humanity to the larger universe. The choice was surprisingly easy. "Let's do it," Jake said. The chamber filled with light as ancient systems activated, downloading thousands of years of knowledge into portable devices that Jake could understand and use. Zara's eyes glowed with joy as she accessed information about her people's locations and status. As the main doors finally opened, Jake and Zara stepped out together, no longer strangers trapped in an alien room, but true partners ready to explore the galaxy. Their wrestling matches had become something far more important, the foundation of a friendship that would bridge the gap between worlds. The adventure was just beginning.